Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajagacharya Avsatarasi Sri Maharaj Vangre Sabha Charanamanda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Santaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai Tai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the sum of devotees. All glories to the sum of devotees. All glories to the sum of devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauran. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Padastabhadare Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharini Nirvishesha Srinravadi Pastatari Shatarini Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, chapter 19, entitled The Appearance of Shukadeva Goswami, text number 32. Parikshirivacha Aho Adya Vayam Brahman Aho Adya Vayam Brahman Satsevya Kshatra Bandhava Satsevya Kshatra Bandhava Kipayati Tirupena Kipayati Tirupena Bhavadbhistirtaka Kritaha Bhavadbhistirtaka Kritaha Parikshirivacha Aho Adya Vayam Brahman Satsevya Kshatra Bandhava Kripayati Tirupena Bhavadbhistirtaka Kritaha. Bhavadbhistirtaka Kritaha Rikshiruvacha Bhuvajavahim Brahman Ladies, Parikit Uvacha. The fortunate Maharaj Parikit said, Aho, Adya, today, Vayam, we, Brahman, O Brahmana, Satsevyaha, eligible to serve the devotee, Kshatra, the ruling class, Bandhavaha, friends, Kripaya, by your mercy, Atiti Rupena, in the manner of a guest, Bhavid Bihi, by your good self, Tirtakaha, qualified for being places of pilgrimage, Kritaha, done by you. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. O fortunate King Parikit said, the fortunate King Parikit said, O Brahmana, by your mercy only you have sanctified us, making us like unto places of pilgrimage, all by your presence here as my guest. By your mercy, we who are but unworthy royalty become eligible to serve the devotee. Please repeat. The fortunate King Parikit said, O Brahmana, by your mercy only you have sanctified us, making us like unto places of pilgrimage, all by your presence here as my guest. By your mercy, we who are but unworthy royalty become eligible to serve the devotee. Purport. Saintly persons like Shukadeva Goswami generally do not approach worldly enjoyers, especially those in royal orders. Maharaj Pattaparudra was a follower of Lord Chaitanya, but when he wanted to see the Lord refused to see him because he was a king. For a devotee who desires to go back to Godhead, two things are strictly prohibited: worldly enjoyers and women. Of course, we can translate that or comment on that by men or women. It makes no difference. Therefore, devotees of the standard of Shukadeva Goswami are never interested in seeing kings. Maharaj Parikit was, of course, a different case. He was a great devotee, although a king, and therefore Shukadeva Goswami came to see him in his last stage of life. Maharaj Parikit, out of his devotional humility, felt himself an unworthy descendant of his great Kshatriya forefathers, although he was as great as his predecessors. The unworthy sons of the royal orders are called Kshatriya Bandhavas, or the unworthy sons of the Brahmanas are called Vijabandhus or Brahmabandhus. Maharaj Parikit was greatly encouraged by the presence of Shukadeva Goswami. He felt himself sanctified by the presence of the great saint, whose presence turns any place into a place of pilgrimage. Om Jnanatimidandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshunmalitam Jena Tasmai Sugurave Namah. Ukam Guru Divachalam Pangam Langantai Girim Yatkipatam Hamande Sigurum Dinataranam Paramananda Madhavam Sri Chaitanya Ishwaram. The fortunate King Parikit said, O Brahmana, by your mercy only you have sanctified us, making us like unto places of pilgrimage, all by your presence here as my guest. By your mercy, we who are but unworthy royalty become eligible to serve the devotee. So here, we're going to be getting a glimpse of the you could say, infectious potency of the association of devotees. Just like if one associates with a sickly person, one becomes infected. Um, it's like in the early, I guess it was 1400s or 1300s, whenever, but across Europe there was the bubonic plague that spread like wildfire, and so many people died. So similarly, when one associates with the uh, proper persons, one becomes infected. And uh, of course, that's the kind of um, illness one should aspire for, um, to get the association of the devotees of the Lord. And according to time, place, and circumstance, desha kala patra, sometimes adjustments have to be made in giving that association. And certain adjustments have to be made by such special personalities. The Bhagavatam tells us how important that association is. Kirata huninda pulinda pulkasha, that even the most unqualified persons, by proper association, can be uplifted. And again, sometimes adjustments have to be made. Just like if one is a very sick person, you have to make adjustments according to the time to take your medicine, according to the degree of disease. The medicines have to be adjusted. So the devotees of the Lord are such perfect physicians that even the most unqualified persons can become purified. Bhavavidha bhagavatas tirtha bhuta swayam vivo. When King Yudhisthira was speaking with Vidura, he glorified him so nicely that the devotees of the Lord are verily personified holy places. They're so powerful because we understand that they're keeping sadhanamridayam toham. The devotees of the Lord are keeping the Lord within their heart. And because the Lord is within their heart, those places, wherever they may go, become sanctified. And we have practical experience of that in our Krishna consciousness movement, that wherever Srila Prabhupada would travel, and wherever his representatives are also traveling, even to the present day, those places become very special. They become purified, and one desires to go to such places. And whenever there's some opposition, the Lord sometimes has to intercede, either personally or through his representative. Whenever there's some I remember some years ago, we were doing some traveling Sankirtan in Kansas City. And in Kansas City, they have a downtown area, and the devotees were distributing some literature there, and the local authorities came and arrested the devotees. Of course, uh, uh, there was no real good reason, uh, even though the devotees had some permits. Still, they were harassed. And shortly after the devotees left, and I guess they were incarcerated for some short time, and they were let out. As soon as they left the town, a big storm blew into the downtown area and flooded the area with rains, and it was a huge storm that just blew in. So be careful how you sometimes may try to obstruct the Sankirtan movement, because the Lord sometimes may personally get involved or send his representatives. So, but the point being that the devotees of the Lord, because they're keeping the personality of Godhead within their heart, they're able to transform any place into a very sacred and auspicious place. It's not that we go to a sacred place for some other reason. We don't go to sacred places for, as the Upadeshamrita points out, we don't go there just to simply take bath. Or we don't go to some place just because of the weather or because it's popular. We go there because the devotees of the Lord may frequent those places, and it makes those places very auspicious. In this case here, we're seeing how Maharaj Pariksit was appreciating the presence of Shukadeva Goswami, and could recognize that by his association, and as we're seeing here by his humility, he was recognizing how powerful that association is, because it can transform those places as well as those persons into auspicious places, make that association very special. But typically, as Prabhupada points out here, the devotees generally don't want to associate with worldly people. Asatsangyatag e Vaishnava chara. They're very careful about their association with worldly people, because worldly people have ardent longings and infectious greed, and by that association, one becomes disturbed. So here, it's very nicely pointed out, and Prabhupada gives the example of Maharaj Prataparudra, that as soon as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu heard that King Prataparudra was a king, he cut off that opportunity, or that association. Because generally, again, the devotees are not interested in associating with worldly-minded people. contrary to popular demand, right? In general society, it's desirable to associate with such materialistic people who are very famous, or they may have some popularity in one thing or one activity or another. And the general um, idea is that you want to associate with such persons, not knowing, again, that by that association, one will become degraded. Therefore, we avoid that kind of association, especially for one who is desirous of going back to Godhead, as Prabhupada points out here. Especially if one is desirous of making a spiritual advancement, that association is very detrimental. Here, Maharaj Pariksit, he's portraying himself as such a materialistic person, but as Prabhupada points out here, this was simply out of his humility, that he was feeling himself unworthy. And that, of course, is the general attitude of the Vaishnava, that we consider ourselves dependent on the mercy of the Lord. Just like we sing every year, Aho dine nate nihita charano ishtam chitam Jagannatha Swamine Anapatagami Bhavatame. There's a beautiful, beautiful verse that describes how the devotees of the Lord are dependent and live by having the association of the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead. They feel themselves fallen and have no shelter other than Him. And that is the fact, that Krishna is our only protector. And here again we're seeing how Maharaj Pariksit was exhibiting those sorts of emotions. He was feeling himself very fortunate to have had the association, or gotten the association of such a great personality as Shukadeva Goswami, considering himself to be very unworthy. But of course we understand that this was simply out of his Vaishnav humility. Prabhupada points out here, Maharaj Pariksit was greatly encouraged by the presence of Shukadeva Goswami and was feeling himself sanctified by the presence of the great saint. And as we can see, and we'll see later on in their association, in their discussions, was very eager to inquire from Chaitanya, or from Shukadeva Goswami. And Narottam Das Thakur points out that unless one serves the spiritual master and acharyas, one cannot get liberation. And part of that service means to inquire. One has to be eager to make inquiry to exalted personalities. We don't look for that association for some material benefit, obviously, but we look to that association to become relieved of the confusion that we have as to who we are and what our purpose is. And in the following verses, there's some beautiful, beautiful questions that Maharaj Pariksit begins to ask. And those questions have to be there. One should be anxious to inquire. Later on in their conversation, Shukadeva Goswami describes that questions about the pastimes and characteristics of the Lord have to be there. And they're compared to the Ganga. Just as the Ganga purifies the three planetary systems, so also the questions and discussions about the characteristics of the personality of Godhead purify those who ask, those who hear, and those who may be listening. Those who are speaking, asking, and those who may be listening. So those discussions are, therefore, this discussion between Maharaj Pariksit and Shukadeva Goswami is so important and relevant to our present day, because there's a great need to hear about the activities of the personality of Godhead. There's a great need to hear about the solutions to the problems of society. There's a great need for an answer to the cheating that's going on in the present society. When you see the character of Maharaj Pariksit, although again he was of the kingly order, and typically you see that, or we understand that as a king one is associating with so many other materialistic, there's pound, shilling, and pence involved. So there's the tendency to become fallen and bad association. But in the case of a devotee, even he may be of the royal order, when that association is there, and because that person is engaged in devotional activities, they become quite the opposite. They become good association, and they become valuable to society. And instead of cheating the populace, instead of misdirecting the people in general and leading them to a more animalistic life, such personalities instead are giving them an opportunity to engage in devotional service and make their lives perfect. So this conversation, which is going on, which we're going to be listening in the coming chapters, is very auspicious because, again, it purifies all of us. And although the king here was, out of humility, expressing such very nice sentiments towards Shukadeva Goswami, we can understand that because Krishna was in the heart, he made this very wonderful arrangement that Shukadeva Goswami could come and speak to Maharaj Pariksit, and we would get the opportunity to hear this wonderful conversation. There's a very nice instruction given by Kavi to Maharaj Nimi, in which he describes that the because of by the chanting process, and we can understand that this means discussions of the personality of Godhead and his devotees. By this chanting process, the heart, the devotees of the Lord become indifferent to material conditions because their hearts have melted due to the effects of a devotional life. So that again is the benefit or the significance of good association. If that good association is there, then we'll become indifferent to the attractions and the allurements of material life, and be very strongly situated in our devotional practices. Even we may have to go out and do so many things and associate with so many worldly situations, still that association will be beneficial. Just as here again, Shukadeva Goswami, although just a young boy, actually, was able, by his spiritual advancement, by his strength, able to give good instruction to Maharaj Parikshit, but really good instruction to all of us as well. So we'll end there. Are there any questions or comments? Naikatma Prabhu.
Thank you, for the class. You may have answered this question at the beginning, or touched upon this point at the beginning, and I was spacing out, but Prabhupada says here in the beginning of his purport that saintly devotees like Sukadeva Goswami generally don't approach worldly enjoyers. And he gives the example of Maharaj Pratapuja, that Lord Chaitanya refused to see him because he was a king. And then he goes on to say, though, that the Maharaj Parikshit was another case because he was a great devotee. But Maharaj Pratapuja was a great devotee. And I mean, so what was the difference? Why was Lord Chaitanya so hesitant to see him? I mean, it seems like Sukadeva Goswami was not at all reluctant to see Maharaj Parikshit, whereas Lord Chaitanya, as we know, eventually did allow Maharaj Pratapuja some access to him, but it was with great difficulty. So what was the difference there?
I believe in that pastime, Srila Prabhupada comments that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu knew that Maharaj Pratapuja was a great devotee, but he had to set some example. So generally we don't, saintly persons don't go looking to associate with worldly people, just out of example. But he gave him that opportunity to again show that example, that the devotees, when they become, if they're qualified, do make that effort to go out and preach to conditioned souls. It's not that we ignore them, but we generally don't go looking for that kind of association. We'll give them our association, but we don't go to them to take something from them. They don't have anything to offer us. But as an example, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as a sannyasi, had to set that standard for his followers. That's what I understand from that. I believe Archita Prabhu has a comment.
Thank you for a nice class, Prabhu. Your last statement kind of summarized it, but the difference isn't between the two kings. The difference is between Lord Chaitanya and Shukadeva Goswami. Lord Chaitanya was an acharya and a sannyasi, was setting the mood for his followers. Shukadeva Goswami was an avadhuta, walking around naked. So he didn't have to set an example for anybody. If he approached a king, who would complain? He came into assembly followed by children and women, and so he wasn't really setting an example for anybody. He was just doing what the Super Soul prompted him to do. Go and speak Srimad Bhagavatam to Maharaj Pariksit. So he wasn't making any distinctions. He was on the Avadut platform. He's not making distinctions. Here's a king, here's a woman, here's a child, He wasn't making such distinctions. But Lord Chaitanya, as an acharya and a sannyasi, he had to make distinctions. He had to say, I am a teacher. This is not good to associate with worldly people, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to. Same thing with women. He's God. He can't be contaminated by the presence of anybody. But he kept women at bay, at a distance, to set the example. Yeah. Different time, different situation.
Time, place, and circumstance. Sometimes the acharyas, the sadhus have to make some adjustment according to time, place, and circumstance.
Again, thank you for a very wonderful class, so many insights and realizations. I just wanted to add something to your own answer, and that is, in spite of the fact that Lord Chaitanya knew that King Prataparudra was a very advanced soul, and yet he was trying to set an example for all other sannyasis to not associate with kings and royalties, even though Lord Chaitanya himself would not be affected, but nonetheless to set that example, as you said. Otherwise everybody, or many of the sannyasis, would start associating with kings and so forth, which is not ideal. But the interesting thing about this is that because Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu knew that King Prataparudra was a very advanced soul, and he wanted to accommodate, he wanted to help, he wanted to give some association to him, and he did it in a very tricky way. He did it through Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said, well, during the Rathayatra parade, there will be a time when Lord Chaitanya will take some rest, and he will go into the gardens, and he will lay down, and he will be in an ecstatic state. And he said, at that time, you should approach him, but don't wear your kingly ornaments or your kingly robes. You wear ordinary clothes, just like anybody else. And when he is lying down, then you begin to recite certain verses from the Bhagavatam in regard to the gopis and their love for Krishna. And while that is going on, you will massage the legs of the Lord. And he will not object, because no one will know that you are the king, because you will be in a disguised situation. So therefore, his desire to want to set the example will not be in any way interfered with. So that's exactly what happened. And the Lord, King Prataparudra was massaging his legs and reciting those verses, and the Lord was saying, more, I want to hear more, give me more. And so actually a very loving relationship was being established in a very overt fashion. So the Lord, on the one hand, he sets the example, but on the other hand, he doesn't forget the perfection of that individual who he's denying the opportunity to be with.
Thank you. Maheshwar?
Anyone else?
Thank you, Naikatma. I have a question. Towards the end of the purport, what I heard you read was what sounded like a negative connotation for the word Dvija Bandhu. And I've always been under the impression that a Dvija Bandhu, which generally means twice born, is something we're supposed to be aspiring for. In other words, a person who is not materialistic becomes twice born when he accepts initiation or when he takes a spiritual life. And yet, the way it read, it sounded like a negative connotation, so I'm a little unclear. Maybe you can help me.
Prabhupada said Dvija Bandhus or Brahma Bandhus. He brought up the term Dvija Bandhu, but sometimes the Brahmanas are called Brahma Bandhus. Sometimes they're called Dvija Bandhus when they're rightly situated, but also they can be fallen and Brahma Bandhus. And he makes that comparison to the Katra Bandhavas, or the Kshatriyas who have fallen.
Okay.
That's where that
All right.
comment came in.
I'm not sure if I'm any clearer on it, but thanks for your help.
Archita.
Dvija Bandhu always means fallen. Dvija is twice born. Dvija Bandhu is the sons or followers of the twice born who don't actually come to the standard. So when the bandhu is there, it always means fallen. Dvija is a twice-born person, and that can be a Kshatriya or a Brahmana, or even a Vaishya. They take birth twice by initiation. But when there's a bandhu or bandhava, it means fallen.
I'm finished.
Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki.